Good morning and Jihwich, and welcome to season 11 of Gather for Her, a powerhouse masterclass series for social impactors exploring what it means to be a relational change maker and leader in these unprecedented times of systemic change. Let me tell you a little bit about Powerhouse. Powerhouse champions relational change makers and their organizations, offering hands at your back support with our relational change maker model to amplify and accelerate the social impact that you're here to do. Our theme this season on Gather is holding space for vulnerability. And this is actually part 2 of 4 parts that began where our annual fire circle left off. And if you don't know what that means, every year in Powerhouse, we host a fire circle gathering over 4 days to inquire into a seemingly unanswerable question or situation and to listen into the space between us to gather up what the direction is from our collective solution finding. And so in season 10 of Gather for Her, we moved forward on an answer that came from our previous fire circle. And our last fire circle was all about how do we heal our systems. And over the 4 days of diving into that, of inquiring into that, of listening into that, what came through so clearly was that relationship and relational ways was like instructions for us. So in season 10, our last season of Gather, that's what we talked about. It was called Breaking Open to Relational Ways. And so in this season, we're taking us out further out onto the skinny branches to explore what happens next. When you're in relationship, the next piece is we hold space for vulnerability. So every Gather conversation is offered to illuminate hope, to encourage possibility, and to challenge each of us to make the shift from individuated leadership to interconnected, or from top down to heart centered, or from transactional to relational. My name is Tina Overbury, or Tina O, and I'm your moderator. I am an ally of settler heritage of Irish and French Canadian descent. I'm currently living as an uninvited guest on the traditional, unceded, and ancestral territories of the Squamish people. And I'm grateful to play, create, and do my best to steward the land where I rest my head on Nequelaquam, also known as Bowen Island. And I'm super grateful to be in circle this morning, in a virtual circle, even though we look like a square, with all of you and with all of our co-conversationalists, the braid of Powerhouse, Charlene Sanjanko, Christina Benti, and Sharon Marshall. Sharon and Christina are not here with us this morning, but the awesome Janet Mohappy Banks, one of our Powerhouse Amplify coaches, is a frequent new braid member here on in Gather for Her. And we're just going to introduce ourselves. So we're going to introduce you, Nicole, in a moment. Char's going to do that, but I'm going to pass to you, Janet, to introduce yourself. And
thank you so much, Tina. As always, I'm so honored and privileged to be here. I am very grateful, very happy and grateful, actually, to be living on the unceded territories of the Coast Salish peoples here in Cole Harbour in Vancouver. I am an international best-selling author, speaker, breakthrough coach, and leadership consultant for high-achieving founders, entrepreneurs, leaders, and change makers. And my work helps you to be the version of you that breaks through all of your glass ceilings, one after the other, to reach the success and fulfillment you want without stressing out, burning out, or freaking out. Thank you so much for having me again.
And good morning. I'm Charlene Sanjanko. I'm the founder of Powerhouse and of Regen Media. I am grateful to be co-hosting a conversation from my home here on the Squamish lands on the beautiful Sunshine Coast of Western Canada. It's my pleasure to welcome a good friend, a dear peer mentor, and an absolute amazing mother, leader, and advocate. I'm going to introduce you to Nicole Nattrass, and I'd like to start by reading her professional bio. So please forgive me reading, but I don't want to miss anything because it's all very good. Here's a little bit about Nicole. Her professional expertise is a culmination of 2 careers, counseling and trauma-informed mental health as work as a practitioner. She is certified she is a certified addiction counselor, And she is a CACCF course provider whose journaling program is called The Promises of Recovery, is currently being used as a key stabilization tool at West Care's outpatient clinic for women in recovery from the opioid crisis in Florida. She works part-time as a clinical director with the Rock Home in North Vancouver, and this is a home for second and third stage treatment for women in recovery. She is a proud supporter of DIVA, a cohort of women as an employee mental health and trauma-informed practitioner. She's training others in trauma-informed practice and facilitation as a professional focus. Nicole is also a theater artist, and she is a Jessie-nominated professional actor with the Canadian Actors Equity and a playwright, having written 10 plays and served as a national forum rep with the Playwrights Guild of Canada. She works as a dramaturg, artist, mental health and trauma informed practitioner, and has been privileged to work with both myself on a solo performance show called Feed the Fire, as well as Tina Overbury on her solo show called Oh My God. So both of these careers are grounded in trauma-informed engagement, heart-belonging practice with deep knowledge, experience, and respect for holding space for the creative process. She's an author of Just the Two of Us, as well as a contributing author in 4 new books, including one coming out this year, The Coach's Guide to Completing Creative Work, by Routledge Press in 2023. Welcome, my friend Nicole, and we're thrilled to have you here on so many levels. And I'm just wondering, I'd like to turn it to you to fill in some of the pieces of how you might want us to know you and how you're kind of showing up here this morning. What did I leave out in that professional bio?
Thank you so much. You left nothing out, Charlene. And, I will say I'm very honored to be here, and I'm also honored to be here in my home, and want to take a moment to acknowledge the First Nations here of Snuneymuxw First Nation, where I'm grateful to live with my family. I'm so grateful to be here, to be able to hear my own bio read out loud is interesting. I just finished putting that together because I feel like there's so much growth and change, and stepping into my own leadership in terms of age. Maybe it's 50. Maybe it's also stepping up as an ally and an advocate. So I really appreciate being asked to gather together here today in this conversation.
Full disclosure to all of our listeners, Nicole's my best friend. And we made a pact that we're not going to go off the rails and get into the clown car. We're going to stay in the conversation. But if we get a bit giggly, that's what this is about. Just going to name it because it's in the room.
Mm-hmm. I've got my serious face on though. So
okay, we'll just breathe our way through that. Nicole, and on a serious note, which is never quite so serious, but it, is always under the surface. One of the reasons why we really wanted to talk to you today is because of your emerging work, the work and that is consistently expanding around the work of vulnerability, and creating safe spaces, and your, I'm going to say, devotion to safety around emergence. I wonder if you might share with us, just in our first question, what holding space means for you in your work. Let us in a little bit into your work and how your approach to vulnerability.
Thank you for asking. Yeah, holding space. It's really important to me. It's a sacred holding, and I really think in the careers that I've had, that I'm having, I've been learning how to hold space um, for artists. I've been learning how to hold space for, when I worked frontline as an addiction counselor for people dealing with trauma. And I'm also learning how to hold space for employees and employers. And, I was thinking about this question came up. And I think it's because I've been learning how to hold space for my own vulnerability in my life. And so it is a full circle. And, because I asked myself, this theme is emerging about holding safe space. And why is that important to me? Why is it important to me? And I think it's because in my work in addiction counseling with many different populations who have experienced trauma, is a key element to them healing is for someone to witness. And oftentimes those people have not experienced anybody to be able to witness their vulnerability and to hold space for them. And so that's become, it's a beautiful privilege. It's an honor, and it doesn't scare me or make me uncomfortable, which is a gift, I think.
I wonder if we might actually back up and, we all speak a common language of holding space, but I'm wondering if you might even just unpack for us a little bit about what it means to you. And then I'm going to just pass to you as well, Janet, because I'm sure you have some opinions around holding space too in your work. But we'll start with you, Nicole, if that's all right.
Holding space really for me is grounded in the 6 principles of trauma informed, which is safety, trustworthiness, and transparency, collaboration and mutuality, historical, gender, and cultural issues. The big piece is also empowerment, voice and choice, and peer support. So I know those are big principles, but when we break down each of those principles, if I'm engaged as a leader, as an employer, as a facilitator in those 6 principles, then I know that I'm able to successfully hold space for vulnerability and really cultivate a safe space. I don't think it's 100%, and this is of great debate. People have written papers about it, about whether we can actually 100% create a safe space. I just finished studying with Elaine Alec, Indigenous author and spiritual teacher, and part of her training is cultivating safe spaces, and that it's an ongoing process. We never just create a safe space. It's about cultivating it on a continual basis.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. It's a moment by moment building trust, holding that safety that creates that safety. Sorry, for me, holding space is about allowing the person to be seen. We were just talking about this in the other episode, but yeah, allowing people to be seen, but without judgment, because and when we can be non-judgmental to ourselves, that's when we are able to be non-judgmental about other people. I really loved what you said there about, that you learned to hold space for vulnerable people by holding space for your own vulnerability. And I think that's where it all comes from. It has to come from inside outwards. I think it's really difficult to hold space without judgment for other people if we're continually judging ourselves.
For sure. Yeah. Just one thing that came up in my mind when you were speaking about that was something about safety that I was thinking about, or being asked about, was if we are cultivating safe spaces and I'm holding safe spaces for vulnerability, the question to ask myself is, am I a safe space? How am I, and that's what you just said too. It's like, am I safe to myself? Am I safe to other people? That kind of safety does start from the individual, and then able to be shared with the larger circle, with community, with employers, with employees. And for me, am I the same person in all the places that I need to be? That to me is holding my own vulnerability.
I wonder if we can expose a little bit around what vulnerability or looks like. Like I to sit with, am I a safe person to myself? I might go, well, yeah, I am. But I'm like, am I? I don't know. And like, how would I inquire or you maybe share with us what vulnerability might look like in the room? Like, how can you let us in a bit further?
Me personally?
Sure, Nicole. Let's go. Let's see. Well, I know. I'll just bring all 5 things up. No. Back to
you. Holding space and letting in on that vulnerability. I think it's about being willing to be transparent. I just been recently really studying trustworthiness and transparency. And transparency, not in the sense of like, I'm going to give you every detail of my life and every thought and like, too much, but transparency in a sense of humanizing, like I'm sharing my human parts with you. And so one of the things, recently that I have been doing in my own vulnerability and sitting in it, and I'm happy to share this now, is sharing my own lived experience in recovery from addiction. So I am able now to say I have lived experience in recovery from addiction. I'm 32 years away from my active addiction. The reason why I can share that now is because I feel safe within. Like before it would be too vulnerable for me to share that. And so I think there's part of that process that we have with ourselves of like respecting and honoring and healing and actually doing the work and the hard things. And so when people share their vulnerability with me, I'm always aware of like, this is hard. This comes from hard places, from painful places or soft places or special places or places I might not understand, but I am privileged to hold this humanity in my hand. And I think personally for me, it's taken a long time for me as Nicole to fully accept all the parts of Nicole. And my relationship with myself was, was pretty harsh, pretty hard judger of myself. And I guess that's the other side of it, is that I can relate to people that might be in that same place.
Shar, I'm just curious what's coming up for you in your work.
Yeah, there's a few things. Like I loved holding humanity, because I think at the root of all of this conversation is there is no me and other. There is no separation. And I think vulnerability is trying to teach us. I loved what Nicole said about the moment by moment process, because holding space is an active verb for me. It's an active verb of, being present, of that dance between I see you at a level that you want me to see you. I don't need to like turn the light on full blast if you're not ready for it. So, for years I've said, what are you ready for? What are you ready for? What are you ready for? That in and of itself is my act of practicing vulnerability, because even though I hold you in the highest regard and I'm so excited for the whole human you are, what are you ready for? And I will try to pace it with you, right? So I think, those are some of the things that are coming through for me. Holding space is not a noun. Space is not a noun for me. Space is absolutely a verb. And it's like breathing. It's like yeah. And finding that energetic verb that, it's not about creating a room. What's the space in this room that needs, that's the environment, but it's deeper than that. Or I don't know, for me, it's more than that. It's like, what's the energetic relationship that's just going to allow us to drop everything that we don't need right now to just get to really what is.
Beautiful. I love that it's not a noun, it's a verb. Because I just finished writing an article about trauma informed, and it's the same message, which is trauma informed is actually a verb. And we hear that word a lot. And one of the things that I was looking up in the definition was said, it's not a checklist. It's not a checklist or a single event. It's in the word that's used in the definition it's a constant process of care, attention, awareness. And in the definition, it says, and possibly will require a personal, professional, or organizational shift, which I thought was really powerful, right? So I love that idea of like this continual process, right? And part of safety for some people is their physical surroundings. What's in the room? What are the access needs? What do we need to provide in order for people to feel like they can get to this energetic place where they can feel safe enough to be vulnerable? And it's my work as a practitioner to not assume that I know that, but to, be clued in and be watching for the signs and awareness, and to then go, as you suggest too, at the speed and rhythm of the person in front of me, while taking into consideration the cultural, historical, gender issues that might be present, right? Isn't it fabulous to learn so much in life?
Definitely. Like, this holding space for vulnerability, this, I have 2 autistic teenagers who are constantly anxious, who are, but in themselves, if they're in their own space, then they are not anxious. It's being in the outside world that creates the anxiety and the stress and the fear. So this whole, we have to take it at your pace. That is my very lived experience every moment of every day with them, and so for me, when you were talking about what creates that safety, I wrote down integrity, my own integrity, what creates the safety within myself that I can then give that to them is my own integrity. Being able to trust myself to do what I say I'm going to do, being able to trust myself with being aware of how I'm feeling. So I know I'm coming to them with the awareness. Actually, I'm having a bit of a funny day today, so I need to be really aware of my tone, of my language, and not project my funny day into them. This is like all part of everything.
I 100%, I feel like you were in my house yesterday. 100% relate to that. And it is about checking in with ourselves first, like that safety piece. And also for me, like expectations, like also checking my expectations and not making assumptions, which I see happen quite a bit in terms of we don't know, a lot of disabilities are invisible. We don't know what folks are carrying too. So that's really why the 6 principles, I think, of trauma-informed care are there to kind of go, okay, what am I missing here? It's like being a detective, trying to, what are the clues, right?
There's so much here. I love that you've just offered and shared with us 6 sort of guiding points of reference, because one of the things that I keep bumping into these days are my blind assumptions. They're not known assumptions. So, like a known assumption, yeah, I can highlight that. Oh yeah. But what about the ones that I don't even know I have as assumptions? And I feel like your work in the world, like because you and I've worked together closely with Live Your Best Story, our workshop, and I've I've watched you hold space, and you're very interesting to watch because I can watch you hold space. There's a physical presence that you bring into a room, and I think I'm mentioning that because holding space is a term that's just loosely used all the time now, and and when I watch you do it, it is so on purpose. It is actually, I could even define it. Like I could point at it and go, "Do you see her holding space?" And I guess what's my question for you? Um, phew, if there was if I was a brand new person walking into my team meeting and saying, "Okay, I'm going to practice holding space," what would you encourage me to start with?
Wow, that's a great question. I would encourage you to start with writing down your expectations, writing down any assumptions, as much as you can that you're going in with, so that you're aware of that and you go, okay, this might creep in. Because what I've noticed is perfectionism creeps in. Like even I, who proclaim to, not be a perfectionist, perfectionism's that sneaky little snake, I call it, that comes in that says, I'm kind of going to take over here in a real subtle way or a not so subtle way. So holding space and becoming curious, like that's what I love that I see in Powerhouse in all the work is curiosity. But curiosity not for picking things apart sake, that's deconstruction. Holding space is curiosity for more empathy, more opening. So I would encourage that. And to really, it sounds whatever, but really putting ourselves in that person's experience. So for example, I worked with this art therapist who I watched, I got to be her assistant, and I watched her work with people who are in recovery from PTSD. And she watched them do art. And the biggest thing that changed for me in that 2-week period or 3-week period was her saying, we treat this work on the page, whatever it is, as if it's the inside guts of the person. So when I look at a piece of paper, I'm going to have a response. I might look at this and go, wow, it looks messy. Wow, she writes really big. She's wasting a lot of paper, whatever it is that my judgments come up. But instead to recognize that this is actually the inside of my guts on the page. So then how would I treat this page if it was my guts on the page? That to me is a really helpful approach. And that's not to say that if someone needs to be redirected or we need to set boundaries or limits in that environment, we do so not with brutal honesty or with clinical tone, but actually we can do the same thing with a loving firmness. So to create that kind of holding space and to really tune into your own body, because part of holding space, I think, is like, listen for the things that aren't being said, not the judgments of the things that I think should be said, but like actually listening for like, what's missing here? What is this person really grappling with? Do I remember a time when I might have felt so vulnerable? And that compassion, and not make assumptions that everyone has the same toolkit that you have, because they don't have the same toolkit. So those are some of the things that I would suggest.
Could I just wrote this down, and it's just, oh, perfect. So what I'm hearing, Nicole, is seeing the person in front of you and not who you imagine them to be. That's just...
Yeah, and while still holding this idea, and I think Charlene and Tina talk about this too, while still holding the wholeness of the person, like the potential for the person, but not holding that potential so much that it becomes my agenda of direction, right? It's like actually knowing like, well, this is where I'm sure people have seen my potential in some area in my life, but it's my autonomy. It's my choice whether I want to go here or here. And if I go here, it's not a reflection of you failing or somebody not doing what I wanted them to do, right? So it really is honoring that. And that relationships take time, you know. Elaine Alec, in her training, which I highly recommend, you know, safety takes time. So if we have the expectation that we're going to walk into an environment and everyone is going to be safe immediately, you know, that's part of why I think I'm branching out in the work that I'm branching out in, is that I recognize that if I can be an employee or team mental health and trauma informed practitioner, that the leader and the CEO doesn't have time to do that work, maybe all of that work. So then you have a mental health practitioner who can come in and like, I love that, take care of all these things and hold space while still focusing. The CEO can focus on what they're doing, and everyone feels great. The employees feel great. So they're going to be supported too. Like it's a win-win situation here. And I think I've finally found that this brings me a lot of joy.
I wonder too if there's an invitation to take this to its simplest form. And I guess what I mean by that is just asking the question. I would want this process, if we're talking about the moment by moment process, I would want everyone to contribute equally to what feeling safe in a safe space feels like for them. That's where I would want to start, like defining that, to understand what that even is. So I think for me, it's not my job to create a safe space for you.
Mm.
I very much want to co-create a safe space with you. Can we all be active participants in the creation of this safe space?
Yes.
And I just want to be careful of that, right? It's like, I don't want to fall into hero and victim, like,
yeah,
right? So
not
it's
at
like,
all. You know,
this isn't church here. This is like, how are we all contributing to this? Because I bet you have an idea that has not even, like, I've not even thought of that. I didn't even know that, right?
Yeah. You know, I just learned how to do a community room agreement based on values. So a whole room, we just did this on Sunday, where we did that. We asked, what would you need in this space to feel safe? And then we
Exactly.
spent time like writing out everyone's values. And those kind of things now, it's called Recipe for a Community Room Agreement based on your values. It's such an incredible experience to be able to do that. And then everybody is involved in those values. So even quiet voices in the room are able to be heard. And it's a shared agreement. And it's really, really worth doing, I think, for sure.
Mm-hmm. I
Yeah.
love that.
Well, when you get incredibly proficient at that,
Well, I just learned it from a webinar that I took from a company in Toronto, a theater company called Talk is Free Theater. And there is a group called ARCS. I don't remember all of what they stand for, but they are a peer-led group who are doing this work. And the webinar was called Recipe for a Community Room Agreement. And they are, to me, on the cutting edge of making spaces safer using this, and all voices are heard in this environment. And they actually are really based in trauma-informed facilitation. So they're going into these theaters and creating this agreement. Yeah.
I'm just so jazzed by the evolution of things these days. And it feels like we're all fumbling around in the dark with our, and a lot of us are fumbling around in the dark with our heart forward. You know, we're falling down, we're getting up, we're saying, I don't know, am I doing this right? What have you learned? Well, I've learned this. This is great. Oh, who's teaching this now? You are awesome. Come on in here. It's such a beautiful shared experience. I feel like because of the last 2 years and all the things that we've experienced, not just one thing, all the things we've all been, we're all like, I don't know anymore. I know what I know. What do you know? Okay, can I learn from you? Oh, yay! How refreshing. So I want to move into our third question, because we kind of did our second question, which is about the medicine of vulnerability. I feel like we're kind of there. And I'm curious, Nicole, for you as a change maker that you are, and however you relate to that term. That's my term, might not be yours. I'm curious, what's the long game of your reimagining or of your visioning of work in the world around vulnerability and your work?
Well, first of all, I'm happy to say that I am so grateful to Powerhouse, because I understand that question a lot more than I did when we first did Power Talks, right? Charlene, years and years ago. We did the second one, right? So change maker, I don't know if I ever considered myself a change maker, but I think I'm a change maker. And that's due to being in these rooms, right? And being in community with Powerhouse, and it's incredible. I think my long game for myself is, I would really love to see our systems, education, healthcare systems, entrepreneurial systems, business systems shift into not just talking trauma-informed practice, which is not about victims. Trauma-informed practice is actually safety, trustworthiness, and transparency, collaboration and mutuality, respecting historical, gender, cultural issues, empowerment, voice and choice, and peer support. And I really, really believe that we can give that, and to really honor the individual, because to me, that's really looking at changing our systems in a way that's going to be impactful long-term, in a way that supports generations and generations of healing, not re-traumatization, because a lot of our systems, I've seen it with dealing with my dad's long-term care, are actually re-traumatizing. They're not built to have safety, trustworthiness, and transparency. We're looking at trauma-informed as if it's a checklist, or we're not even really walking the talk. So my hope is long game is that we actually, organizations say, gosh, it's going to take 3 hours to do a community room agreement. It's worth it, because the bottom line is, if I put in all that work and I implement these 6 principles, the results are going to be incredible. So my hope is that we work more towards prevention. Yeah.
That's a soundbite. I want you to know that last little bit. I'm going to like take it out and send it to you so you can, back to Char's work that she often says as in the Amplify path. You said you wanted this. You want it? You sure you still want it? And what a beautiful thing that you just said. So clear, Nicole. Thank you so much.
Thank you for asking me to articulate it. There's been a lot on my mind in the last 3 years, as you know, COVID, truth and reconciliation, my own education, caring for my parents' education systems with kids that, you know, have anxiety. And yeah, I really think we can do more in prevention instead of waiting.
Mm-hmm. We're going to move into our last round of where we'll each have a chance just to share what we're leaving with. And then we'll pass back to you, Nicole, for what you're leaving with. You'll have the last word, and then I'll wrap us all up. I feel like this season, my last thing is always the same thing. It always feels like, I don't know, it must be the stage this is in. I don't know. Because what I'm leaving with is, again, is to Overbury. It's like, if I talk to myself, it's like, challenge what you think you know. Like, just challenge. Not that I need to be wrong or that I need to be right. It's just, have I taken that breath to challenge my assumptions? Am I willing to do that? Am I willing to be vulnerable enough to challenge my assumptions in this room? I'm leaving with that again. It's just like a different sentence, but it's the same work. So thank you for reiterating that for me, Nicole. And janitor, Char, I pass to you.
Yeah, for me, I loved the when you said holding humanity. That was a real sort of heart ping, and also this with the holding space, putting ourselves in that person's experience, I think is vital, really. I mean, you know, that's where emotional intelligence lives, you know. And the last bit about, you know, creating trauma-informed, value-based foundations is just so important as we rebuild these systems, you know, as we knock them all down and recreating them from this trauma-informed, value-based position, I think is just, yeah, fantastic. Thank you, Nicole.
Love it. I absolutely love prioritizing prevention. That rings and resonates so deeply. And I also love, T, what you said about, I think the space we're in right now is just willing to be vulnerable enough to challenge assumptions. I think that's where we're in 2023. What I'm leaving with is just a feeling, a thought around inputs and outputs. And it relates back to regenerative media. The more that our inputs are encouraging us to really get on the same level as prioritizing prevention. So conversations like this, stories, are what we're experiencing in our inputs, rather than where we have been around trying to solve the reactions and the problems that result in think getting to the root of our problems is prioritizing prevention. And that's the exact type of projects and that I want to be involved in. That those are our strongest inputs on a daily basis. And those are the rocket fuel behind the long-term game. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me to this conversation and for sharing presence with everyone today. And I think that the piece that I'm learning, often at the start of the new year, I usually pick a word or a theme. I don't do New Year's resolutions, right? And my word for this year is actually liberation. And so I'm wondering if in our vulnerability, if there's liberation. And I know for me that I'm curious about that. And I think I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Nicole. You don't know this, but in our last Gather for Her conversation, we actually held 7 seconds because if you're just tuning in, and Nicole has been a teacher to me of taking 7 seconds when a new learning comes in or whatever it is, an experience happens, to allow some space for integration and to land.
And for our central nervous systems to actually receive, right? We're always moving to the next thing, to the next thing, to the next thing. And I think sometimes that 7 seconds allows us to, those neurons to fire.
Thank you.
Thank you.
For all of you listening, I want you to know that Nicole, actually, context. So as Powerhouse furthers its work with change makers and continues to evolve the leader path into what is needed to support change makers and social impactors today, we need brave spaces to practice and adapt and adjust and fall on our face and learn from each other. And in that brave spaces, in a brave space, it also means there needs to be place for safety and for safety checks. And so Powerhouse is developing a care team of people who are available should anything come up in the room, in any of our programs, in any of our facilitated works that we do. I want you to know that Nicole is going to be part of that care team. And so I'm so glad we were able to introduce you here. And I'm just going to close us, officially. Thank you for joining us on Gather for Her, a Powerhouse Masterclass series, unpacking what it means to be a relational leader in these unprecedented times of global change. I want you to know that this conversation has been recorded, and so it is going to be shared on our YouTube channel, and again, as a podcast, renamed as The How for Her, which you can find on Spotify and all the other places that you listen. Gather for Her is created by Powerhouse, where we champion relational leaders using our relational changemaker model, which looks like a community of practice called the Leader Path, which I've spoken about, our storytelling platform called Amplify, and our constellation network that is the House. Everything we do is guided by Indigenous and ancestral wisdom, which is more often than not matriarchal and matrilineal in our approach, and that's where the her comes from in our name. We want to thank our impact media producer and sister company, Regen Media, Charlene Sanjenko, who reminds us that we can take the power of media into our own hands when we support stories that heal, regenerate, uplift, and transform. And we want to thank the hands at our back, Powerhouse and Regen's digital storytellers, Zoe Gray, Madeline Archibald, and Willow Smith. And thank you to my co-hosts and sisters in change, the braid of Powerhouse, which is Charlene, Christina, and Sharon, who aren't with us here today. But today's braid member, Janet Mohappy Banks, I just so appreciate the energy that you bring to the space and the heart and the openness. So thank you, Janet, for being here. And to our listeners, our community of change makers, leaders, and social impactors, thank you for walking with us in co-creation of the world we're living into together. You're always welcome here each week on Gather for Her, which is now on the Leader Path, where we meet weekly and we unpack these conversations and we practice the bravery, being brave in relational leadership. So thanks for being here, everybody. And Nicole, as you know, you're always welcome in my house and in the house and all our houses. There's always a cup of tea waiting for you. And
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here, everybody. We'll see you all again.